Welcome to CyberJA, the place where we discuss all things cyber and GRC. And I am Richie Perry, your cybersecurity and GRC enthusiast. And in today's video presentation, I'll be sharing with you the best practices for implementing the NIST Cybersecurity framework. What is the NIST Cybersecurity framework? The National Institute of Standards and Technology, that's NIST, cybersecurity framework pretty much provides a policy framework of computer security guidance for how private sector organizations in the United States can assess and improve their ability to prevent, detect, and respond to cyber attacks. It can also be used to help identify and prioritize actions for reducing cybersecurity risk. And it is a tool for aligning policy, business, and technological approaches to managing that risk. So, different types of entities, including sector coordinating structures, associations, and just about any organization can adapt this framework to increase the resiliency of your cybersecurity posture within your organization. Now, with that said, let us look at the best practices that you can use as a cybersecurity professional to implement this framework within your organization. And I'll be outlining 7 security best practices or several best practices that you can use to approach the implementation of this cybersecurity framework. And first of all, this is what the NIST cybersecurity framework looks like in terms of its structure. And it has 5 elements: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recovery. And in the identify phase, you look at asset management, business environment, you look at governance, you look at risk assessment, you look at risk management strategy. Under protect, you look at identity management, authentication and access control, awareness and training, data security, maintenance, protective technology. In the detect phase, you look at anomalies and events, security, continuous monitoring. You look at detection process. In the respond phase, we look at the response planning, communications, analysis, mitigation, improvements. In the recovery phase, the last phase, you look at response planning, improvements, and communication. So that is what the cybersecurity framework looks like. All right, so let's look at the step-by-step framework implementation guide. And these are a number of best practices that you can adhere to, you can adapt in the process of implementing this cybersecurity framework within your organization. And the first step is to prioritize and scope. Prioritize and scope. And in this phase, you identify your business mission or objectives and strategic priorities. You describe cybersecurity risk and determine organizational components to use within the framework. And let us also look at that in a little bit detail. Now, when implementing the framework as it relates to prioritize and scope, an organization first identifies its business or mission objectives and its strategic priorities as they really relate to cybersecurity. So with this information, an organization, or you can help the organization in making decisions regarding cybersecurity implementation and determine the breadth and scope of systems and assets that support its objectives. An organization can adapt the framework to support different business lines or processes which may have different business needs and associated risk tolerance. Secondly, we have to orient. That's the second best practice approach, right? Orient. Now, at this stage, an organization identifies the systems, assets, requirements, and risk management approaches that will fall within the scope of the effort. This includes current organization standards and best practices, as well as any additional items that can enable the organization to achieve its critical infrastructure and business objectives for security risk management. The organization's risk management program may have already identified and documented much of this information. So, in general, organizations should focus initially on critical systems and assets, and then expand into systems and assets that are less critical or central to their mission. And additionally, the organization should identify the approach to determine its current risk management and cybersecurity posture. Thirdly, create current profile. Let's create a current profile. And this is the phase in which the organization develops a current profile by indicating which category and subcategory outcomes from the framework core and currently being achieved. And the purpose of identifying a current profile is not only to develop a map between organizational practices and category and subcategory outcomes, but also to help in understanding the extent to which practices achieve the outcomes outlined by the framework. To identify the current profile, organizations may use the evaluation approach. Example, self-evaluation or facilitated approach. Third step, best practice, fourth step rather, is to conduct a risk assessment. That's to conduct a risk assessment, and in this phase, you identify cybersecurity risk, right? Evaluate and analyze risk, identify risk above tolerance. Now, in this phase, right, this assessment could be guided by the organization's overall risk management process or previous risk assessment activities. So the organization analyzes the operational environment in order to discern the likelihood of a cybersecurity event and the impact that the event could have on the organization. It is important that the organization incorporate emerging risk, threats, and vulnerability data to facilitate a robust understanding of the likelihood and impact of cybersecurity events. The fifth best practice as it relates to the NIST Cybersecurity framework implementation, right, is to create a target profile. In creating a target profile, the organization should consider the current risk management practices, current risk environment, legal and regulatory objectives, business and mission objectives, and organizational constraints. Now, the target profile outlines the key category and subcategory outcomes and associated cybersecurity and risk management standards, tools, and methods, and guidelines that will protect against cybersecurity risk in proportion to the risk facing organizational and critical infrastructure security objectives. Sixth step is to determine, analyze, and prioritize gaps. And in this phase or step, the organization compares the current profile and the target profile to determine gaps. Now, to address those gaps, it creates a prioritized action plan that draws on mission drivers, right? A cost benefit analysis and an understanding of risk to achieve the outcomes in the target profile. The organization then determines resources necessary to address the gaps. And the seventh and last step in terms of best practices is to implement action plan, right? So that's to implement an action plan. And this is where the organization determines which actions to take regarding the gaps, if any is found, identified in the previous step, and then monitors its current cybersecurity practices against the target profile. Right? So an organization may repeat the steps as needed to continuously assess and improve its cybersecurity. Right? So there we have it. The 7 steps are best practices that you can use as a cybersecurity professional to guide you in the implementation of the NIST Cybersecurity framework. So step 1 is to prioritize and scope. 2, orient. 3, create current profile. 4, conduct a risk assessment. 5, create a target profile. 6, determine, analyze, and prioritize gaps. And 7, implement an action plan. And this process is continuing until you achieve your objective of building that baseline for cybersecurity resilience within your organization. So there we have it. Don't forget to subscribe, to turn on the notification bell for the latest updates. So see you in future presentation.